Hello, good day. Welcome to our e-learning for today. And for this week, we're going to talk about grammar lessons and spelling lessons only for grade 5. And for today's video, we're going to talk about two grammar lessons, and they are the following. First, we're going to discuss subordinating conjunctions. And if you have the reader's notebook, it is in page 103. And second, we're going to discuss dependent and independent clauses, and it's in page 104. If you are prepared for this lesson, let's start discussing subordinating conjunctions. What is a subordinating conjunction? So here, a subordinating conjunction connects two thoughts, okay? So two ideas, which we call a clause, to make a complex sentence. So we're going to talk about complex sentences later. So we focus now first on the idea connects two thoughts or clause. So the clause with the subordinating conjunction cannot stand on its own. So we call this clause dependent clause, and it needs the rest of the sentence to make sense. So what are subordinating conjunctions? I have a list here of words that we use most of the time in our sentences, and we call this actually as subordinating conjunction. Here are they. So examples of subordinating conjunctions: after, although, as, because, before, even if, even though, if, when, while, and unless. So these words are what we call subordinating conjunctions. Okay? So with this subordinating conjunctions, it actually gives us idea about group of words that cannot stand alone, which we call dependent clause. We're going to discuss later dependent clause. So let's focus on some examples. So number one, because of an infectious disease, we study at home now. So you can see the word because is in red font because this is our subordinating conjunction. Now I'm going to underline because of an infectious disease. This is what we call a dependent clause now. Okay, so it makes we have this dependent clause because of this subordinating conjunction here, the word because. We go to number two. Liza ate some fruit while she took a break. Now you can see the word while here. While is an example of the subordinating conjunction, and while she took a break is an example of a dependent clause. This dependent clause cannot stand alone, so it doesn't make sense. So if you read it alone, while she took a break, so it cannot stand alone. It needs the rest of the sentence, Liza ate some fruit, to make it complete. So that's why it's called dependent clause. Next, number three. We waited for her before we went back. Now you can see the word before here. Before is an example of subordinating conjunction. Okay? And now we read before we went back. This is a dependent clause. Now if you read it once again, before we went back, it doesn't make sense. Before we went back. Because it is a dependent clause. It cannot stand alone. It needs the rest of the sentence, we waited for her, to make it a complete sentence, to make it make sense. So we waited for her before we went back. Next. When it started to get dark, the group went inside. So here you can see again when. When is an example of subordinating conjunction. So when we read, when it started to get dark, this is an example of a dependent clause because it cannot stand alone. It does not make sense. If you read it again, when it started to get dark, so it doesn't make sense. It cannot stand alone. It needs the rest of the sentence, the group went inside, to make it complete. Alright? And now, that is because of the word when. Okay? So these are our four examples of subordinating conjunctions. So these are our four examples of subordinating conjunctions. Because, while, before, and when. So remember this. These words we use for different types of subordinating conjunctions here. And these underlined words are what we call dependent clause because they cannot stand alone. They need the rest of the sentence to make it sense, to make it a complete thought. All right. Let's go to this next slide. This is a copy or list of subordinating conjunctions that you can use in sentences. I want you to pause this video to copy all of these subordinating conjunctions in this image right now. So if you're done copying, let's go to the next slide. All right. So right now, I want you to answer this activity. So here you're going to circle the subordinating conjunction and underline the dependent clause with it. So we have 5 sentences here with subordinating conjunction. you're going to circle or you're going to highlight the subordinating conjunction and you're going to underline the dependent clause with it, just like our examples before. So I have 1 to 5. Now I want you to pause this video and get a notebook and copy this activity, and you can answer at home right now. And be honest, please, because I'm going to show you the correct answers in the next slide. So you can start your activity right now. Okay, so if you're done, let's continue. So here we have 5 sentences. Let's go to the answers. So here you can see the word although. Okay, that's a subordinating conjunction. When is a subordinating conjunction. While, if, and because. So how many subordinating conjunctions do we have? 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Now, where are the dependent clauses? So again, they are near, they are very close to the subordinating conjunction. So although it is a bit late, so that's our dependent clause. So it cannot stand alone. It doesn't make sense, even if you read it again. Although it is a bit late, so it cannot stand alone. It does not make sense. Next, when the COVID-19 stops. So does that make sense to you? Yes, it does not make sense. So it cannot stand alone because this is called a dependent clause. It needs the rest of the sentence to make it a complete thought. Next, where is the subordinating conjunction and where is the dependent clause? So let's read while we are hiking. So while we are hiking, again, does that make sense to you? It does not, because it cannot stand alone because of the word while here. So while we are hiking is an example of dependent clause. Next, number 4, my father said we will head back if the traffic became too heavy. So you can see here if. If is an example of a subordinating conjunction. And if we read if the traffic became too heavy, this is an example of a dependent clause. Again, if you read if the traffic became too heavy, it does not make sense. It cannot stand alone because this is called a dependent clause. It needs the rest of the sentence to make it a complete thought. Number 5, we stopped near a waterfall to rest because we were tired. So because is an example of subordinating conjunction, and because we were tired is an example of a dependent clause because it cannot stand alone. It does not make sense. If you read it again, because we were tired, it does not make sense. All right? So next. So let's summarize our lesson. Subordinating conjunctions connect a group of words to a sentence. The words that follow the subordinating conjunction cannot stand alone as a sentence or dependent clause. So remember, every time that you see the words while, because, after, even though, if, these words are actually subordinating conjunctions. And if we have this in a group of words, it will make, all right, it will make the group of words a dependent clause. Next, again, these are the examples: if, when, because, while, although, before, even if. And you can watch the video again for the part that the image with the list of subordinating conjunctions. Okay, so we are done with the first topic for today. Let's go to the next topic, and that is dependent and independent clauses. So this is our topic for this next one. So what are dependent and independent clauses? So a complex sentence, let's talk about what's a complex sentence first. A complex sentence is made up of, first, a dependent clause. So this one, we're done with it. And the next one is an independent clause. So let's talk about what's a dependent clause first. We just finished this. A dependent clause begins with a subordinating conjunction and it cannot stand alone. So I've discussed this before, just a while back. And finally, what's an independent clause? It can stand on its own. So let's discuss some examples. All right. So here, number 1, while she was studying, the wind blew so hard. Okay. Number 2, we went home after hiking the mountain. Number 3, because it might rain, we took our umbrellas. So here in number 1, you can see while. Again, this is a subordinating conjunction. And with subordinating conjunction, you can find with it a dependent clause. So while she was studying, so that's a dependent clause. Now here, the rest of the sentence is what we call an independent clause. I repeat, this is an independent clause and we're going to use double underline. So we're going to underline it twice. The wind blew so hard. Now let's read this. The wind blew so hard. Can it stand alone? Yes, it can stand alone. So we can cover while she was studying, the wind blew so hard. So the wind blew so hard, it makes sense. It can stand alone. Therefore, because it can stand alone as a complete thought, this is called an independent clause. Let's go to number 2. So you can see here, after hiking the mountain again. So after is your subordinating conjunction. And I think you know where is the dependent clause right now. Now, where is the independent clause? So the independent clause is we went home. Okay, so we went home, it makes sense. It can stand alone. Now, after hiking the mountain is what we call dependent clause. Remember that. This is dependent clause. Finally, number 3, because it might rain. So we are going to underline it once because remember, this is your subordinating conjunction and the words with it is it might rain. So if we read because it might rain, this is an example of dependent clause. It cannot stand alone. It needs the rest of the sentence to make it complete. So where is the independent? Independent, which means it can stand alone or it makes sense. We took our umbrellas. We took our umbrellas. That's an example of independent clause. Okay? So I hope you understand everything. Let's go to your practice. Please pause this video, copy, get your notebook, and answer this activity right now. Practice number 2 for today. So let me read it for you. Although it was hot and humid, we decided to go fishing. So remember, how do we answer this? You need to find the subordinating conjunctions first. Okay? If you found the subordinating conjunction, the words with it is what we call the dependent clause, and the remaining part of the sentence will be called the independent clause. Okay? So number 2, number 3, number 4, and number 5. Again, pause this video and copy it and answer it because I'm going to show you the correct answers in the next slide. So if you're done, let's check your answers. So these are our answers. Okay? So number 1, although it was hot and humid, we decided to go fishing. So the answer here is, although it was hot and humid, this is your dependent clause. And we're going to underline twice, we decided to go fishing. So why is this the independent clause? Look again, there's a comma in between. Although it was hot and humid, it cannot stand alone. So this is your dependent clause. And we decided to go fishing. You read it again, we decided to go fishing. It makes sense. It can stand alone. So this is what we call the independent clause. Okay? Next, we want to go to the park. Now, check. Do we have a subordinating conjunction here? We don't have. So remember, if there's a subordinating conjunction, it is dependent clause. If we don't have subordinating conjunction, it is independent clause. So this is an independent clause because it can stand alone and it makes sense. And finally, since the weather was nice, you can see here the subordinating conjunction since the weather was nice. Okay, so this is your dependent clause. Next, while we were at the park. Now you can see here while. While is a subordinating conjunction. And with it and until the comma, we call this dependent clause. You're right. Next, we decided to take pictures. As you can see, it's a simple sentence now. It can stand alone even without this part. Even if we erase this part and we say we decided to take pictures, it can stand alone. It makes sense. So this is what we call independent clause. Next, we went home. We went home, which means it makes sense. Okay? So it can stand alone. Therefore, this is your independent clause. Now you can see here the word subordinating conjunction because. And this because is a subordinating conjunction because the park was overcrowded, that it cannot stand alone. It does not make sense. Because the park was overcrowded, it does not make sense. Therefore, this is what we call a dependent clause. And finally, because of the rain, you can see here again the subordinating conjunction. And together with it until the comma, it's a dependent clause. And we stop swimming, that's our independent clause. Remember this, most of the time, independent and dependent clause are separated by commas. As you can see in number 1, number 3, and number 5, they are separated here. Okay? So that's our lesson for today. We're going to continue our lesson on Wednesday on grammar. We're going to continue here as you can see. And I want you to study this lesson because you're going to answer this in Socrative task for tomorrow, Monday. I hope you enjoyed the video. Thank you for watching. This is Mr. Johnson signing off. Thank you and goodbye.